Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Intuitive Creators Spotlight. We are here to share stories of intuitive creators who have embraced their own gifts, they have embraced their own path, and now, they are embracing their mission to serve the world and the people that come into their space. I am Stella, your host. I am a guide for intuitive creators who want to feel seen and be rewarded for their gifts. And today I have an amazing guest, Martina. Martina is a beautiful, soulful guide who is using various tools and her experience to guide people through their own journeys. She's using fairy tales, she's using earth-based spiritual practices, and she is helping people rediscover their purpose. She has been through a lot of her own lessons herself, and she's going to share some of that with us here in this video. But I am so excited to have her here, and I can't wait to just have this conversation with her here. Hi, Martina, how are you? And tell us about something that is exciting at the moment in your life and in your business.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. The thing that really fuels me and excites me is helping people who are experiencing a loss of self to reclaim who they are and to remember that they're sacred and that they are magic and that they deserve good things in their lives. And I think that comes out of my own experience, having kind of lost my way for a few years when I was a caregiver for my mom. And having done this work of kind of rebuilding from scratch and remembering, who I am and what I want and what my soul is here to do and what I like and what's fun, and that it's okay to have fun and hold fun and sometimes sadness at loss. And that kind of is the underpinning of everything I do, is really kind of helping people find their story, shape it, and live it in the way that they most want to.
That is so beautiful, Martina. And I know that you have an incredible heart. And I also feel that through all of your experiences that have been quite challenging, at times, you continued to keep that love for the world, for yourself, for people, and an understanding of what compassion means and how can you navigate through that. So I know that you use a combination of like fairy tales and a lot of beautiful practices and magic, and also your skill in copywriting as well. So how do you feel like all of these things that you know and you practice and you experience yourself, how do you feel these can also help other people?
Well, I think one of the reasons that I really love using story and myth and fairy tale and goddess spirituality and stories that are sort of, to me, that come kind of from feminine wisdom and oral tradition and those sorts of things, is that they have these universal archetypes that are part of each one of us. And often I find it's a lot less, I don't want to say threatening, but sometimes that it's easier to kind of see yourself in something like a story containing some sort of universal archetype that represents what it is you're going through, what it is you're working on, what it is you want to become, is easier than sometimes just saying, boy, I self-sabotage a lot, and kind of looking at yourself directly. I feel like story becomes kind of a gentle portal into seeing our own selves mirrored in another experience. And then we can kind of use that and use tools like transformational language arts to kind of dig deeper into who we are and what it is that we really want, and to kind of experience the wisdom of our soul that I think we all come here with, right? We definitely have things to learn in our time on Earth, but in some ways we also come here knowing everything we need to know. It's just a matter of learning to trust that voice
Absolutely.
within, or from the universe, or whatever you want to call it.
I love it. And that is true. Stories are powerful. And also the stories that we're telling ourselves as well, they are very, very powerful
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah.
I feel that I really want to ask you this question, as you've been working so much with stories in general and also doing the copywriting work in your career
Mhm.
too. How can someone maybe heal by looking at their own story? How can they shape that story or look from different angles at their own story
Mhm.
so that this story becomes healing for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think we can learn from every experience we have. I don't think there's some cosmic finger that's pointing at people and saying, you suffer, you get cancer, you get this, you get that, and that we get those things because they we're supposed to learn some lesson from them. But at the same time, we do learn lessons from everything that happens to us. You know, everyone has their own trauma and their own story and their own background. For me, I was a caregiver for my mom for 8 years. She had front temporal lobe dementia, which is a really, like, any dementia is hard because you're caring for someone who's losing themselves and someone who is nobody survives it, right? Nobody survives Alzheimer's, nobody survives front temporal lobe dementia. It's from the moment you're diagnosed, you know that your loved one is going to die, and that no matter how amazing you are as a caregiver, and you know that even if you did everything right, you're still going to lose that person. So you have that grief. And as you're going through that experience, in the case of something like dementia, sometimes for years, it changes you. Nobody comes out of experiences that involve big things like life and death the same as they were when they started it. So I think knowing our stories, first of all, and knowing whatever trauma we have and whatever experiences we've had can help us identify areas where we're maybe holding ourselves back, where we suddenly realize, like, where it clicks and we think, oh, okay, I'm doing that because XYZ happened to me. And there's some part of me that's still scared of that happening again. I mean, I think something that's really important to remember is even our kind of negative habits that we want to that we think, I'd really like to get rid of this, at some point in time, they worked for us. They either eased some pain we were experiencing or helped make life a little bit easier. And even if they were kind of misguided, it's like our body and our selves way of trying to protect us from something. The problem is it can be 8 years later and we're still holding onto that part.
Mm.
And so I think knowing our stories and knowing where some of our behaviors originate can really be a big help in letting go of those things, those parts that don't serve us anymore, and of figuring out, so often, I mean, it's kind of a cliched thing, but like, your wound is your message.
I
And
love
so often those things that we've experienced really are a big part of, especially the ones that are kind of more profound and that touch us more deeply, whether happy or sad, right? Not everything has to be trauma, but those things that we feel on a deep level that kind of just become part of our soul, those are like the little arrows pointing to the path we're supposed to be on, I believe, and to our purpose and what we're here. Ultimately, I think purpose is tied to, it's going to sound Pollyanna-ish, but I'll claim it. I really believe it. I really think all of us are here with some sort of unique combination of personality, experiences, natural talents and skills, and that we're supposed to take those and leave things better than when we got here. And that doesn't have to mean finding a cure for cancer. It can be raising a beautiful human being. It can be doing something, to alleviate the suffering of caregivers because you know how hard it is and how bad it feels. And I think that's like really the kind of major, more spiritual outcome of understanding our stories.
Absolutely, because then, like you said, once you go through your own story, you become aware of that kind of scenario in someone's life, and automatically you become more compassionate to
Yes.
all the people in that in the same kind of situation. You know exactly what they're dealing with, and you can help them. So, for example, like, because you have been a caregiver for someone who had this condition, right? You will, like, if somebody will come to you and they'll say, okay, I am a caregiver, and they will tell you that their loved one has similar condition as your mom had, you will know exactly what they're going through. You will know exactly what words to use to help them, maybe in that morning when they're having a chat with you, to guide them to maybe some resources that they can read or access, for them to make their own experience just a little bit easier. And so when we're going through a specific type of experience, we can then help others. This is why I've worked with clients who maybe they've been through like a very difficult immigration process, and then they are helping other people go through the same, or maybe single moms who have even more than one child, and they have to deal with everything, and then they
Yeah.
become those guides for other single moms. There are so many different scenarios and stories that people are going through, but then it's
Mhm.
what we do with that story that matters, right? It's, instead of going into that victim mode forever, like, how do we
Yes.
go through it? How do we share, then how do we bring our gifts through that story, right? And just share that light with our people. And I love what you said, that it really helps to know your story. It really helps to know your story. So for the viewers, if they are at a point where they feel like, how can I bring my story to the surface? How can I connect with my story? What kind of advice would you give them?
For me, a lot of my kind of inner work happens through writing. And I think that's just because I've been sort of a natural writer and storyteller in a way all my life. I just have loved it since I was a little kid. Like, some of my earliest memories are my grandmother sitting on her porch with her and her telling me these, she was German, and her telling me these European folk tales. And she never read from books. She always told them to me from memory, as her mother probably did and her mother before. And you start feeling like you're just this connection to this long line of ancestors and wisdom. And I think that's one piece that's really important, is knowing that you come from this long line of ancestors and wisdom, and all of the stars that had to align for you to even exist, the people who had to meet and come together for there to be a you. That's like incredible. Like, if you don't believe that there's magic in the universe, that alone should be the answer. And I think if you can embrace that you have that magic within you, and the unique gifts that come with it, then you start to understand that you're worth the time to invest in figuring out not just what your story of the past has been, but where do you want your story to go? How can you use those gifts? And there's so many different modalities that you can use. I think writing and meditation are really similar for me. I get into a state of flow where it kind of is like meditating. So I think those two things are really helpful. Hypnosis can be an amazing, amazing tool in kind of connecting to that inner voice. Any kind of creative acts, I think, if you can let go of, we all start out creative as little kids. And then as we get out into the world and grow up, we start attaching these expectations to it of, this has to be good. It's not good enough. I'm not good enough. And but if you can let go of that and just sort of start letting your spirit guide you to whatever it is you need to say or create, you can find a lot of answers in
Mm.
those acts about yourself and what you're here for, and use them to dive into your story and pull out those pieces that are significant, and look at the ones that maybe aren't serving you as well and starting to release it. The other thing that I would say that I use a lot in my practice is just this idea, being pagan, I follow the wheel of the year, and I believe everything is cyclical. So even if you're at a low point right now, you're going to be at a high point again, because that's just the nature of nature and the nature of life. And everything goes through these periods where, we're seeding, then they're blossoming, then it slows down, and the autumn comes like it is right now in the Northern Hemisphere, at least. And we have trees shedding leaves, right? And that's all a mirror of, we're part of nature. So we have those periods in our lives these times as well, these times when we're, when we need to look within and kind of look at the story that we've been living and the stories we tell ourselves, right? Those are really important stories, because they can keep you tethered to the ground, like
Absolutely.
like you've got weights tied to your ankles, or they can help you soar and fly through life. And I'd rather soar, but there's those moments when we do feel down or feel like there's something between us and what we want. So I think recognizing that we all go through these seasons, and that it's okay, and that we have to take time sometimes just to stop and let go of the things that aren't helping us, is just as important as looking at what we want.
Absolutely, because we change, we grow, we evolve. And
Mhm.
like you said, we're part of nature, and like the seasons are changing, we are also changing too. We are growing. We connect with other people. We may have children, grandchildren. We may have the people coming into our world, into our life. And so through connections with others, we also recognize a lot more things about ourselves. Because like you said, absolutely, I think the stories we are telling ourselves are pivotal. They are so important, because then what we're telling ourselves, and the way in which we communicate with our own hearts and minds, then it's being reflected in every other relationship that we have with friends, family, clients. It doesn't matter. This is why when you see an angry person, a frustrated person, a lot of the times is not about like who they're trying to project that on. It's more about
Yeah.
themselves, because they are going through their own anger, and they just don't know how to navigate through that. Maybe dissolve it if that's the case, maybe alchemize it, because when we have
Yeah.
a certain type of energy, we can always like alchemize it and transform it into something more, or into something different, right? So you can totally tell, like when somebody has been telling themselves like, oh, I'm stupid, then they may use the same kind of energy in their communication. Or
Mhm.
when somebody is, you can tell when someone is having a routine of like maybe looking in the mirror every day and telling themselves that they are beautiful, and then you'll see that in their
Yeah.
attitude with others too. So yes, I think stories are fascinating, and I've been fascinated by stories since I was a little child, because I think that there is something to learn in absolutely every single story. So I wanted to ask, is there a story that you remember from what your grandmother told you? Maybe something that you just like a lesson in a story, or something that you remember that stays with you until this point?
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. I think, I can't remember if I first heard it from her or somewhere else, but my favorite folk tale is, I want to say it's Norwegian, and it's called Tatterhood. And it's about this princess who is really unconventional. She's not like the Cinderella or Snow White type princesses who, are running away from something that is hurting them. And then they find a prince who fixes everything and they get married and live happily ever after. Her story does have a prince in it, and she does end up finding love in the end. But she's this kind of tomboy princess who wears these kind of tattered clothes, and she rides a goat, and she carries a giant wooden spoon that she uses to beat off witches and trolls, and she's completely fearless. And one of the things about the story that I love, my favorite part of it, is the end of it where she's with the prince and talking about, that's the other thing, she arranges her own marriage. And she's with the prince and talking about, you know, kind of conventional beauty things, and he he's giving his perspective on what she looks like, and she's saying, well, no, I'm beautiful, and no, I don't just ride a goat, this is my beautiful steed. And how I just love how much self-belief she has and how much she believes in her own magic, and that in speaking these things she creates a kind of magic where he suddenly is like, oh yeah, you're right, you are all of these amazing things. And so I really love that story. And then I guess the other thing that really sticks with me just through having heard all these stories from my grandmother when I was a kid was they all kind of start in, a village, or whether it's you're looking at something like the stories about the Baba Yaga in Eastern Europe, and any of it, Snow White, any of those sorts of stories, is you start kind of in the village or this place that you know that might not be perfect. It could be pretty awful, but it's what you know and it's safe. And the place where growth starts is when you leave the village and you go into the forest that holds the witches and monsters and trolls and stuff like that. But if you look at most fairy tales, nobody ever dies in the dark forest. They might be scared. They might think, I want to run away, but nobody ever dies. They come out of it and they grow. And you have this kind of template of like the heroine's journey within it that I think is so applicable to our own lives, that in order to grow, you have to leave what's familiar. If you stay in the same place all your life, you're never going to experience anything, and you're never going to have the opportunity to grow and learn more about yourself. And at the same time, you have to be willing to face your fears. And often when you do, I mean, some things are just plain scary and they're always going to be scary, but there's a lot out there that is really not that bad once you just do it and once you realize you're capable of handling it. So I think those are my favorite sorts of lessons from fairy tale and folklore in general.
I love it. And thank you so much, because I can totally see your passion when you're remembering these things and when you're sharing about them. And what came to me as you were explaining it is that, for example, a girl may leave her village, and then her growth starts in the forest, for example, right? And then there can be other people living their own villages somewhere else, and they all come into this forest, right? And so they all connect with each other, experiencing their own growth. And then you'll find these good and bad, like characters, but in reality, they're all going through their own experience. And I think there is so much to learn from folklore for sure, because through these characters and all of them, like some of them sound like humans, others not, but you still learn so much from them. And yes, for sure, like in the past, they were sharing these stories through like verbal communication more. And I love that. So Martina, for those who are watching us, what would be an invitation from you to them, maybe with something that they can start doing right now if they want to embrace their own story and to get to know it better? What can they do right now? Something simple, small.
I think, just starting, if you don't journal already, starting a journaling practice is probably my number one way of doing it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be written well. It can be stream of consciousness. It can be whatever you want it to be, because it's yours and it's just sort of this outpouring of your heart. But I know for myself that I find sometimes the longer I write, and especially if I just say I'm going to write for 30 minutes, and especially if I do it with a pen for some reason rather than with a computer, because it just feels like it's more connected to myself and my body, and it becomes this sort of wand that facilitates this outpouring of what it is I'm thinking about and what I want. I find the longer I do it, the more it flows, and some of the stuff that just comes out stream of consciousness ends up being the most valuable when I go back and read it later.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Martina.
Sure.
So let us know how people can find you. And of course, we will share the links in the description of this video. It's more so if you can describe the spaces, right, that people will find once they'll connect with you. What kind of energy they can expect from you or help?
I think my approach to, like, I really love personal growth. I really love earth-based spirituality and goddessy stuff. So everything I do is really kind of coming from a more space, a space that's more aligned with feminine wisdom and kind of gentle growth. It's not the kind of, I don't know, some personal growth stuff feels really patriarchal and like you're working with a drill sergeant or something. And that's so not my interest. My interest really is not even in me telling people what to do, but in helping them figure out what happily ever after means to them, and to really be able to embrace that no matter how different it is from what maybe conventional wisdom is, or what other people want to do, or what their mother or their brother or their spouse or whomever wants them to do. It's all kind of about just connecting with your own spirit and figuring out why you're here, and this creating space for that.
Thank you so, so much, Martina. I appreciate everything that you've shared today with us, and I'm sure that everyone who's watching us, if you've watched this far, then that means maybe you found some value in this video. If you did, please like this video, share it with your friends, family, whoever you feel like they need to hear these thoughts and stories. And if you want to be notified of more of these videos and other kinds of videos as well, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to stay connected with us. And my free gift to you, you'll find it in the description of this video, is a free guide. It's a Master Practitioner Checklist. And that is for those of you who work with clients and you want to really learn what is it that makes them come to you, like you, trust you, and eventually want to work with you. And on this note, I'm sending you all my love, and I really hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.